2 atomic bombs. 2 cities. 3 days apart. And the same man was in both places, less than 2 miles from ground zero. Twice. This actually happened. And the most insane part of this story, you don't know yet. August 6, 1945. Hiroshima, Japan. 8:15 in the morning. The city is alive. Commuters. Schoolchildren. Market vendors moving through the streets. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is 29 years old. He's a marine engineer working for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. He's been in Hiroshima for 3 months on a business trip, designing a new oil tanker. And today is finally his last day in the city. He packed his bags. He's heading to the train station. He's going home to his wife and his infant son. And then he realizes he forgot something. His hanko, a personal identification stamp, the Japanese equivalent of a signature. He needs it for official documents. He turns around. Goes back to get it. That forgotten stamp is the first of many moments in this story where a single small decision separates life from death. He retrieves it. He turns back toward the docks. He looks up and sees an American B-29 bomber passing over the city. He notices something fall from the plane. A small object. Connected to a parachute. Then the sky turned white. The bomb known as Little Boy detonated over Hiroshima with the force of 16 kilotons of TNT. The blast wave traveled at nearly 1,000 miles per hour. Temperatures at ground zero reached 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. More than 2/3 of the city's structures were destroyed almost instantly. Between 70,000 and 140,000 people were killed. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was less than 2 miles from ground zero. The shockwave ripped him off his feet. Spun him through the air. Threw him into a nearby potato field. Both of his eardrums ruptured. He was temporarily blinded. The left side of the upper half of his body was covered in severe burns. He later described the moment to journalists. He said, "I didn't know what had happened. I think I fainted for a while. When I opened my eyes, everything was dark. I couldn't see much. It was like the start of a film at the cinema before the picture has begun, when the blank frames are just flashing up without any sound. The blast had kicked up so much debris it nearly blotted out the morning sun. Ash was falling from the sky. A mushroom cloud was rising over what used to be a city. He was burned. He was bleeding. He was barely conscious. But he was alive. He crawled toward the ruins of the Mitsubishi shipyard. And then, against every probability, he found his 2 colleagues, Akira Iwanaga and Kuniyashi Sato. Both alive. All 3 of them spent that night in an air raid shelter, surrounded by a city that no longer existed. And in the morning, they made a decision. They were going home. August 7, 1945. 1 day after the bomb. Yamaguchi is burned. Nearly deaf. Running a fever. Moving through the ruins of Hiroshima on foot. The information coming out of the city is fragmented and censored. He doesn't know the full scale of what happened. There are no smartphones. No news alerts. Just ash and silence and the smell of a city that burned overnight. He and his colleagues make their way to the train station. The train is still running. They board. And Tsutomu Yamaguchi travels home, to his wife, to his son, to the city where he was born. To Nagasaki. He receives treatment for his wounds. He rests. His body is broken but he is alive. And then, on August 9th, despite his burns, despite his injuries, despite surviving a nuclear bomb 3 days earlier, he reports for work. He was a dutiful employee. He had a job to do. He had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. August 9th, 1945. Nagasaki. The Mitsubishi offices. Just before 11 in the morning. Yamaguchi sits down with his supervisor. Bandages still wrapped around his burned skin. He begins to describe what he witnessed in Hiroshima. 1 bomb. 1 explosion. An entire city, erased. His supervisor stares at him. "You're crazy," the man says. "One bomb cannot destroy an entire city. That's impossible." Yamaguchi keeps talking. He describes the flash, the shockwave, the mushroom cloud, the silence that followed, the ash falling like snow. And then, at 11:02 in the morning, the American bomber Boxcar dropped the second atomic bomb over Nagasaki. The bomb known as Fat Man, 21 kilotons of TNT. Yamaguchi's workplace put him, again, approximately 2 miles from ground zero. The same distance. A different city. 3 days later. The white flash came again. The shockwave came again. The world went dark again. His office building collapsed around him. He crawled out from the rubble. He was alive. Again. Let that land for a second. A man was sitting in an office, describing the atomic bombing of Hiroshima to his supervisor, who had just called him crazy, when an atomic bomb detonated outside the window. That is not a metaphor. That is not a dramatic exaggeration for storytelling purposes. That is exactly what happened. It is verified. Documented. Confirmed by the Japanese government. His wife and 5-month-old son, who were elsewhere in the city, also survived. At least 40,000 people were killed instantly in Nagasaki. By the end of 1945, that number would climb to somewhere between 70,000 and 80,000. And Tsutomu Yamaguchi was now a survivor of both atomic bombs ever used in war. In the weeks that followed, Yamaguchi couldn't replace his ruined bandages. He suffered from high fever and continuous vomiting for over a week, the classic signs of acute radiation exposure. He lost hearing in his left ear permanently. He developed cataracts. He suffered from acute leukemia. And he watched the people around him carry the damage too. His son Katsutoshi struggled with serious health problems his entire life and died of cancer in 2005. His wife Hisako, herself a survivor of the Nagasaki bombing, suffered from radiation-related illness for decades and died in 2008 of liver and kidney cancer, at 88 years old. For most of his life, Yamaguchi said almost nothing publicly about what he had been through. He went back to work. He helped translate for American occupation forces after the war. He returned to Mitsubishi, designing oil tankers, the same work that had taken him to Hiroshima in the first place. He raised his family. He lived quietly. But the bombs never left him. For decades, the Japanese government's policy was to certify atomic bomb survivors for only one bombing. Yamaguchi's official documentation listed only Nagasaki. Hiroshima was not acknowledged. As if one catastrophe was enough to count. It wasn't until January 2009, 64 years after the bombings, that Yamaguchi formally applied to be recognized as a double survivor. The government accepted his application in March 2009. He became the only person in history officially recognized by Japan as having survived both atomic bombings. The Japanese call it Niju Hibakusha. Double survivor. He told reporters, "My double radiation exposure is now an official government record. It can tell the younger generation the horrifying history of the atomic bombings, even after I die." Something shifted in Yamaguchi in his final years. After his son died in 2005, he broke his decades of silence. He wrote a memoir. He wrote poetry. He appeared in documentaries. He got his first ever passport at age 90 and flew to New York City to address the United Nations, where he pleaded for the abolition of nuclear weapons. He wrote to Barack Obama and received a response. He said, "The reason that I hate the atomic bomb is because of what it does to the dignity of human beings." He said, "I can't understand why the world cannot understand the agony of the nuclear bombs. How can they keep developing these weapons?" He had come to believe his survival was not an accident. That he had been spared, twice, against every conceivable probability, for a purpose. And that purpose was the voice he became. Tsutomu Yamaguchi died on January 4, 2010. He was 93 years old. The cause of death was stomach cancer, almost certainly connected to the radiation he absorbed over 2 days in August 1945. A few months before his death, someone asked him how he felt about surviving what no human being should have survived, once, let alone twice. He said, "I'm lucky to have survived. Everything that follows is a bonus." He was 29 years old when the first bomb fell. He was 29 years old when the second bomb fell, 3 days later. He lived another 64 years carrying both of them. At least 160 people are believed to have experienced both bombings. Only Tsutomu Yamaguchi was ever officially recognized. Think about the math of his survival for just a moment. On August 6 he forgot a stamp. That delay repositioned him by minutes. Those minutes may have saved his life. 3 days later, on the other side of Japan, he was 2 miles from a second nuclear detonation. Fate. Chance. Coincidence. Call it whatever helps you sleep. But the story of Tsutomu Yamaguchi doesn't let you look away from the question underneath it all: what does a man do with that? He answered it himself. He told the story. Over and over. To journalists. To schoolchildren. To the United Nations. To anyone who would listen. Because the world, he believed, needed to understand what an atomic bomb actually does. Not as a statistic on a page, not as a strategic calculation in a war room, but as something that happened to a 29-year-old man on a Tuesday morning because he forgot his stamp. On his 91st birthday, someone asked him about nuclear weapons. He said, "The bottom line is, there shouldn't be nuclear in our world." He had survived both bombs. He had earned the right to say it.